Thank you so much. The next item is the call to order. So this is the meeting of the MWPA Board of Directors for June 15th, 2023. Could we do the roll call, please?
Certainly, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Starting with the Bolinas Fire District, we will not have Director Molesworth with us this afternoon. We also will not have Director Paul Jeschke from Muir Beach. And so Mill Valley, Director Burke.
Present.
For the City of San Rafael, Director Kurtz.
Present.
For the City of Larkspur, Director Paulson. Looks like Director Paulson is not here with us. For Inverness, Director Donahue.
Here.
For Kenfield, Director Evergettis. And for Marinwood, Director Shea.
Here.
For Novato, Director Goings.
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow, Director Finn.
Here.
For Seven Marin, Director Hilliard.
Here.
For Stinson Beach, Director White.
Here.
For the Town of Corte Madera, Director Casisa.
Here.
For the Town of Fairfax, Director Kohler.
Here.
For the Town of San Anselmo, Director Feynman.
Here.
For the Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Here.
And for the County of Marin, President Rodoni.
Here. Thank you so much. Item 3 is agenda adjustments. Do any board items or staff want to adjust the agenda for any reason? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, which is open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to government code, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matters not on the agenda. Comments should be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful of the community. Please remember to silence your phones during the meeting and mute your microphones when not reporting out. Martina, can we see if there's anyone in the virtual audience that wants to comment today?
Certainly, sir. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on any items not currently on the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for anyone joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you. Move to item 5 then is the executive officer's report. Mark?
Yes, good afternoon, President Rodoni, board members. Start my screen share. Happy June. And as we all know, I'm sure we all know, June is Pride Month. So we wanted to recognize the importance of recognizing that people need to be included, and no matter what, and they're just people. So let's just accept that, and I'll leave it at that. Fire season update. Some of you may have seen some smoke to our north, and that is from the St. Vincent's area. It's part of the Marin County Fire Department's Wildland Fire Academy. So it is our smoke. It's not bad smoke. Brings back memories for me, since that was my department's academy, and lots of good times training young firefighters there. And it was quite rejuvenating for us to bring on well, it used to be 50, now it's like 200 seasonal firefighters. They kind of keep you young. You either fall behind or you stay young, keep you young. So, but the fire season update, like we talked about, we do anticipate fire seasons start to be slower and later this year. Looking at the maps that we have here, June and July, you see that our area for June is large fire growth is expected to be below normal. Coming in July expects to be normal, and you still see quite a bit of below normal in that map, and that's largely due to snow. However, once that snow melts, there's what's called snow down. And so not only do you have the previous dead and down, you're going to have additional dead and down that was caused by the snow, and it will dry. So it will be interesting. And I'm not predicting a huge fire season. I'll reiterate what I've said before. Historically, after a drought busting year, we have a bad fire season. I'm sure you're all watching what's going on in Canada. I'm being a little bit selfish, thankful that the smoke's not coming to us, but as you know, it's coming down into much of the eastern seaboard. And, you know, a lot of people are asking why is this happening in Canada? And a lot of the mechanics of why it's happening in Canada is very similar to why it's happening here. Many people forget that Canada routinely has a robust fire season. Alaska has a robust fire season. It's just typically shorter. The fires that they're experiencing now are bigger, more catastrophic than normal, and about a month earlier. They didn't have necessarily the same type of winter we did, but I think one of the things besides climate change that's driving what's going on now is that they had an extraordinarily dry May. So the fuels are ahead 1 month and they're drying. Some of the areas where the fires are burning has received very little fire management over the years, meaning they don't suppress the fires. That area is an area where natural routine fires do occur, but they're still seeing the devastating fires. And in some of the areas, it is where they actively suppress. And also there's a challenge for Canada. They don't have the wildfire suppression mutual aid system in Canada that we have here. They can't mobilize forces in the same way that we can in the United States. Really quick thing on Ember Stomp, because Ann's going to cover it a little bit more thoroughly than I will, but tremendous success. But I did want to give a shout out to the board members that were there. And I'm just looking across the room, no particular order. Director Kurtz, Rodoni, McMillan, Finn, Kohler, Hilliard. Paulson's not here right now, but he was there. And I'm sorry if I missed anyone that was there. So important to have our leadership attend. And I think it was very well received just for our community members to see our elected officials attending. BMS recruitment started yesterday. It's up and open, it's running. We're going to be able to start sharing that vegetation management specialist recruitment out to our partner agencies, get it up on social media, get the word out. We'll ask you as well if you know anyone that would like to apply. And the way the position description is written, we're looking for people with and/or experience. And that is environmental sciences, that type of degree, or fire science and experience. And with hiring two positions, we're kind of looking at merging, not having the two complement each other. Have someone with environmental science background side by side with someone with a fire background so they can work well and leverage each other's strengths. Ann and I, after Ember Stop, had the opportunity to go to the California Fire EMS and Disaster Conference, CFED. We were asked to present there, talk about the MWPA, but whenever we go to these conferences, it's usually the networking that you have that is far more important. One of the first presentations we heard was given by retired Fire Chief Bob Roper from Ventura County Fire, who represents California in the Western Fire Chiefs. And he was expressing frustration that FEMA has with distributing their grant monies. And that is has no way to see that there's a return on their investment that they're giving communities with their grants. And I'm going, well, I can see what you're talking about. We have an answer to that. And that's actually in today's meeting, our goals passing the measures of success for goals 1, 3, and 5. We actually will be able to start showing the return on investment for those grants. And then timely again for today, we did have a presentation from Fire Chief Dave Winokur from Moraga Arenda Fire, talking about the challenges of insurance and how we can work with insurance agents, companies, and reinsurance, along with our wildfire mitigation efforts to continue to ensure that insurance can be provided. And then Ann and I had an opportunity to present with a model that lined up with what Chief Winokur was talking about. So the number one question Ann and I received while we were there wasn't so much, how did you guys create the pace and scale that you're doing? They all acknowledged and were in wonder of the pace and scale of our work. But the number one question was, how did you guys create the MWPA? How were you able to get 17 member agencies together in this form of governance? So it's at first, quite frankly, I think that was the right question for them to ask while we were there. You'll see there's a item in consent. I wanted to call it out here so you guys can go into the consent calendar well informed on the master services agreement. The goal for that is to put out that request for qualifications so that we can create a vendor list. We already have a preferred vendor list, but now we can create a master services agreement with our contractors that lists their skill sets, their abilities, and their rates, and already have contracts in place with them, so that when we are ready to launch them onto a project, we don't have to go through a protracted procurement process. We've already gone through the procurement, put them on a project, and then they can invoice us directly. What's been happening a lot is our member agencies have been having to go through their own procurement process, get the invoice, pay the invoice, then send us an invoice with a copy of the other invoices so we can have verification. So we're trying to create efficiencies so that the member agencies no longer have to use that procurement process. So we look at releasing that RFQ here real soon, and we'll bring the master services agreement template to you in August for approval. Mill Valley. Mill Valley, as many of you know, starting in 16 days, will be fire protection will be annexed by Southern Marin Fire. And it created a question that we're still working on to answer, but we think we know the direction the answer is going to be. And does that mean that Mill Valley will continue as a member? So when we looked into the ordinance language and we looked at the JPA language, it's silent about departure. It talks about how to onboard a member agency, but it's silent to how an agency would leave. And so far, the opinion is the voters voted for Mill Valley to be a member. And since it's silent on departure, we feel that it would be appropriate for Mill Valley to continue to be a member and continue to have a spot on the board, spot on operations, and a spot on the ATC. But we're continuing to follow up on that and get a final resolution, which we intend to bring back in August. And my second to last item is we will be doing another wildfire behavior awareness for the resident on June 28th. I did send an email to all of you. This is going to be the second time that we'll have a camera crew. So warning, there will be a camera crew there because our goal is to take the two events and take some studio time to make this into a 20-minute PS or 20-minute video that anybody can watch. I really like the location that we're going to be going to because it's both creating defensible space, but it's also a strategic location to keep a fire from one canyon to the next. And my last one is the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break did get tested a couple of days ago. We did have a fire within the footprint of the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. It was only 1/8 of an acre, and I cannot with a straight face apply any credit to the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break for keeping this fire at 1/8 of an acre. It was going to be 1/8 of an acre no matter what, because of the weather that was there that day and the fuel moisture at the time. It wasn't going to get any bigger than that, regardless of the work. So why am I bringing it up? Part of the modeling that we did was to prioritize what areas we should work in. And we wanted to prioritize where we thought we needed to get the work done first, because that was where it was most likely to have a fire occur. So I think this validated to an extent the modeling that we were using. The first time we had a fire anywhere near the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break happened to be in one of the areas that we prioritized. So I'm really pleased with that modeling. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mark. So questions of Mark, Barbara?
I just want to thank Mark for coming to our council meeting last week and presenting where we are on the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority and more specifics that people were interested in Fairfax. And I know some people cornered Mark after the meeting and wouldn't let him go. But he handled that well, as always. So thank you very much, Mark. I know that was out of your day, and thanks for the prep that you did to put that together.
My pleasure. And I've visited Mill Valley, Corte Madera, and I'll be at Ross tonight. I think it's important that we continue to tell that story, and the presentation for this go around is called "What is the MWPA doing for you?" So that way the residents who attend these meetings can see their tax dollars being used for their good.
Stephen, did you want to comment?
Just ditto to what Barbara said. Thank you for coming to visit us. I don't believe you were cornered after your comments, but you were thanked and it was gratefully received. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Catherine, did you have something?
Just an announcement to add to that. So the Regional Fire Academy had its graduation last week and I went. This was at San Geronimo Golf Course, and that multiple agencies trained. We have a female firefighter in Southern Marin who was number 3 in the class. which is both academic and physical agility. So I just wanted to say how proud I am of all of them. And this is an added bonus. So training together is really great. And I'm just always proud of, our accomplishments. So I just wanted to add that.
I have a
Thank-
feeling they're
thank you.
right over there right now.
All right. Other questions, Mark, about the executive officers report? All right, I think we'll go to the public then, Martina.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, item number 5 for the
Five.
executive officers report, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *6 if you are joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Bringing it back to the board for any further discussion. There's no motion or direction required. All right, we'll move on to item 6. Before we do, though, I just want to say that Megan Azevedo is on a well-deserved vacation, and we're pleased to have Rob Epstein here representing their office, his office. Thank you. Consent calendar, the opportunity for public comment on consent calendar will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. Or any alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board member or staff member for separate discussion and vote. So now I'll take public comment on the consent calendar.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on item number 6, the consent calendar, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands for comment.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Does anyone wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Barbara?
Perhaps I can just make a comment or a question for Mark. So I noticed on item 6C, and I brought this to Mark's attention beforehand, I didn't see any insurance requirements in the agreement in either the original or the amendment. So do we have those incorporated?
Staff recommends that the motion to approve consent include the language of adding our standard insurance requirements language to the contract.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Barbara. Other comments? Okay, we're going to go ahead with it.
Chair, sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
I wasn't at the May meeting, so I need to vote separately for the minutes. I'm actually not vote at all.
Okay. I think it's okay if you just vote noting you abstain on the minutes.
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right, so we're going to move ahead and have the consent calendar in one motion. Looking for a motion in a second. Okay, we got-
I'll second with the friendly amendment that Mark Brown, our executive officer, provided.
And Mark, you're fine with that amendment? So it's been moved by White, second by Kohler. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, one abstention on the minutes. Thank you, Alexa. Two abstentions on the minute. Thank you. Very good. So we're going to move to item 7 then, which is staff reports. The first report is the finance report. Alyssa is in the audience, I believe, somewhere.
And Elisa will be joining us in just a moment. Elisa, you should be coming over. There she is. Can you hear us, Lisa?
There you go.
Can't hear you very well.
I'll talk louder.
There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person. One of these days I will. I don't have any changes since the report was issued, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions on the finance report? ahead.
Yeah, I just have one in terms of the comments on the due to higher revenue. It's stated twice. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yes, so we pass through to the agencies a percentage of the revenue, the Measure C revenue that we received from the county. And so the revenue that we have received so far is slightly higher than we had budgeted. And so those payments are going to be slightly higher.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Any other questions on the finance report? All right, So seeing none, I'll take public comments then on the financial report.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the finance report, please raise your hand in the reactions. For the joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands.
Thank you. So I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion. No motion or action is required. Okay, we'll move to 7B then, financial year 22-23 work plan implementation update. Ann?
Right, I will just share my screen. All right, fantastic. Here we go. The first few slides here really focus on the outreach we've been doing. We have been meeting with a lot of folks. We've been bringing people out to project areas. One of the most recent field trips we hosted was and included a few people in this room. Thank you, President Rodoni and Vice President Julie McMillan for joining us. We hosted CAL FIRE as well as several other folks, Senator McGuire's staff, state parks, Supervisor Rice, Marin County Parks and Open Space staff, Marin Water staff, and others on a tour of the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break on June 11th or June 7th. And that was a really fantastic opportunity to talk about the project and talk about the work we've been doing. And, you know, CAL FIRE was also really interested in the structure of the MWPA and how we were formed in addition to the project itself. This was a great opportunity to talk about how much we're getting done and what the costs are of getting this work done, since CAL FIRE is a funding agency for this project. And Mark has a few comments on that.
I asked her if I can add in just a couple things because I was really blunt with the CAL FIRE guys. I said, we're bringing you here so you can see the great work that your money is helping to pay. We want you to see that we are a very good investment for you. And when you see more grants coming from us, we really think you should fund them. And then we also talked about the comments that Chief Roper had said, and we are actually going to be one of the only agencies that can give you measures of success and a return on your investment. Then we also had an opportunity to talk about some challenges that we may have with the goat grazing industry. And so there's a specific resolution that could happen very easily while still maintaining the character of the assembly bill that is causing the dramatic increase in the grazing. So I wanted to prep you guys that there could be future requests coming to the MWPA board to support that, to be able to keep the grazing costs at a reasonable level. And the last thing is that CAL FIRE hosts or houses a committee called the Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee. Todd Lando from Central Marin Fire is an alternate member on that. There is no seat on that committee for an organization like ours, since there is no organization like ours, but they've invited us to come and participate in an informal way. And so it's going to be able to have an opportunity for us to help share what we're doing, but also learn from others and maybe help shape guidance in the future at a state level.
Thanks so much, Mark. Another field trip that we took part in was one hosted by Marin Water, and that was with 5 state assembly members, including Rivas, Grayson, Wood, Helleran, and Connolly. And this was a great conversation, partly about water and watershed management. And so we were talking about fuel reduction efforts within Marin Water lands, and had the opportunity to really highlight the MWPA, let them know who we are, how we're formed, how we function, and all the great work that we're doing. And then, of course, no discussion about outreach would be complete without discussing Ember Stomp. Fire Safe Marin does have a spot on the agenda today, so I won't go into too much detail, but it was an amazing affair. Thank you all so much for those of you who joined us on that day. I think Fire Safe Marin counted about 5,000 participants joining throughout the day, and that was an incredible number. When we reported that out at the Cal Chiefs meeting, the CFED conference, their jaws dropped in the room. They could not even imagine the prior year's 2,000 attendees, let alone 5,000 this year. So that was a huge win, and it really told the story about how we're all working together to get the word out and get awareness up in the county. We had a lot of great conversations at that table at Ember Stomp. A lot of them really centered on the CHIPPR program, the resident grant program, a lot of praise for the resident grant program during that time, and the CHIPPR program as well. And we had these great figures showing projects, polygons on the maps in each of the zones, and those were a great topic of conversation as well. So a lot of good conversations kind of pouring over those maps and comparing project areas next to homes and neighborhoods where people are living. We've also been meeting with folks on the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. So sent 5,200 postcards to residents in the project area to invite them to a public meeting back in May on the 24th to discuss phase 1 of this project and answer questions. Novato was fantastic. We had Panorama there as well, helping to present. And we answered a lot of really thoughtful questions during that time. It was a 2-hour-long meeting and filled every minute of that time. We had around 45 or 50 people attending either in person or online. All the materials from that meeting are online on the project webpage, including a video of the presentation. We also hosted a webinar along with our ESP partnership friends, and that included Dr. Brandon Collins, who's a PhD. He works with Berkeley Forests and in the Scott Stevens lab. He talked about forest management in the Sierra Nevada mountains and fires, and it really focused in on owls, the California spotted owl, and habitat impacts from fires. It was a really interesting discussion, a really good presentation with a lot of technical information, a lot of graphs, a lot of photos. And so if anybody is interested in seeing that, we have that up on YouTube now, and it'll be up on our website probably by the end of the day today. That should be on our science and research webpage. I'd say one of the take-home messages from that discussion was that there isn't really time to wait to do all of this really needed forest management. It's so needed. We shouldn't wait for perfection. We should go and learn as we go, adaptively manage our projects. And so that was one of the take-home messages that I heard during that presentation. I'd like to give a shout out to Stephen Peters, who's managing our CHIPPR program. A lot of great responses from residents who take surveys after they get this free service. So you can take a look on this slide. Great service by Stephen Peters. Stephen was incredibly helpful and responsive. The day went off without a hitch, and he made it very easy for me. So really successful program, and about double the contacts from last year. About 500 pickups in the first 3 weeks. We're about 4 weeks in now. And this is a photo of the CHIPPR program supporting some defensible space work around the historic West Point Inn. The grant program also received a lot of kudos during the Ember Stomp tabling event. Here's a photo of Italian cypress being removed from someone's backyard next to their fence. We are starting this program back up July 1st, so we're excited to start writing checks again. We passed, or this board passed, $800,000 for fiscal year 23-24. As you might recall, the access and functional needs requirement will be reinstated for this next fiscal year. And you might imagine that most of the folks who are applying for these residents already qualify under those requirements. And so we don't think it'll impact the program too much. 80% we're estimating already qualify in terms of access and functional needs. The webpage is updated now with the additional information. We've got new materials ready to go, and we're communicating with our D-Space inspectors to make sure everybody's got the right talking points this year, and we're really excited to get that going again. So I wanted to take a slightly different tact in this slide in terms of reporting progress on projects, vegetation management projects. This slide includes kind of a survey of some of our member agencies who are implementing projects actively. And it shows per zone projects that are being implemented right now as we speak. And then projects that were just recently completed, maybe just in the past couple of weeks. So we have a lot going on. It is nesting bird season, so things are a bit slower during nesting bird season. We're very thoughtful and careful to make sure we're complying with Fish and Game Code 3503 and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And so we've got biologists supporting these projects. So we've got in West Marin, the evacuation route project in progress in the Inverness area, going slowly again because of nesting birds. We're avoiding northern spotted owl habitat, things like that. In Nevada, we've got 5 projects currently underway. If you include the Marin Valley Goat Grazing Maintenance Project, which will get underway in the next couple of weeks. And then a couple of projects were just recently completed, including the Bahia and Station 63 demonstration garden. In the central zone, we're really talking about the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. In particular, we have 1 crew removing brome currently. In the San Rafael zone, we have goats on the hills, as many of you have seen, and that always is a favorite, at least of mine and of many of the members of the public. We've got the South San Pedro Mountain project that will be completed in the next few days, so that's exciting. And Southern Marin is working on the Ring Mountain Shaded Fuel Break project, again, with nesting bird surveys in coordination with Marin County Parks and Open Space. And that's it for me. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ann. Questions of Ann? Julie?
And I just wondered about the pile burning on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. I wondered how the public received that and if you could kind of generally quantify if it's been more beneficial from a cost standpoint to do that versus chipping and hauling.
Yeah, that's a great question. On May 24th and 25th, Marin County Fire helped with pile burning for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. And these were areas specifically difficult to access for pulling material out and shipping. I don't know that I have the number off the top of my head of how much that would have cost, but the burning itself cost about $17,000 for the 2 days. It would have been a really extensive process of pulling material up with cables, and it probably would have been a bit destructive in terms of the soil surface and vegetation along the way. So I think this was a really effective way of handling the biomass. It was, one of the first times that we've done pile burning for one of our projects. And so for that reason, we were really careful about making sure everyone is up to date, making sure people know ahead of time. We called all of the schools in the area to make sure that they were aware that they didn't need to call 911 and these were planned activities. A lot of communication took place, a lot of flyers and mailboxes for the residents in the area. We had an A-frame sign designed and printed and out on the street. We made sure that we broadcast the information far and wide. And residents were very, very supportive. I think folks were a bit nervous about having piles of material sitting outside their homes over the next fire season. And so getting out there and doing this work was really appreciated. A lot of positive feedback, no 911 calls that I'm aware of, and just a lot of praise and support. Not much in the way of smoke, a lot of coordination with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We worked through their process to make sure we had all the right permits, a smoke management plan in place. Staff was very, very supportive and asked us to tag them in social media posts to make sure that the public knew that they were supporting and really support this kind of work.
Is that something that will be repeated down the road in that area as well as other areas?
Yes, I think so. In areas where we can safely pile burn and where removing the material would be astronomically expensive or potentially disruptive to the vegetation and the soils and the hills around, I think it's a really viable option. And I think future maintenance will probably include less of that because we're removing a lot of that initial treatment. It produces more biomass. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Kathy.
There, no, the picture of the removal of the tree in the yard piqued my interest because I had that question from one of my constituents in Inverness. And they asked about, would the grant funds support the removal of trees? And on a broader question, is there something in the grant process that covers what can be covered versus what shouldn't be covered? Like what kind of materials, on if someone wanted to replace their siding on their home, if they want to do fire safe materials instead of shake shingles or something, is there an informational, I don't know, what you'd call notation or something to say what would be covered and what not?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. The grant program is directly linked to the inspections that are done around the county. And that's to make sure that the dollars from the grant program are really going where they do the most good. And so those items that are identified during the inspection process can then, we know that they're issues, they've been identified by a qualified professional as a safety issue. And then residents can go through that process to then apply for dollars to help reimburse them to do that work identified in the inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a question on the grants. I understood that now for defensible space, it's limited to AFN. But did that also include the home hardening? We never had that before. Is it the home hardening grants also limited to AFN? Really?
Let me see if I can pull that up on
I
my
mean,
screen. So I
we
can
didn't do that in
check.
any years that I'm familiar with.
Let me pull that up. We may also have Maria who can help answer that question. Let me see if I can pull that up. So we've got eligibility requirements will be reinstated this year to focus on residents with access and functional needs. Applicants can apply for an MWPA home hardening grant up to $5,000 to match their own equivalent investment. Selected home hardening improvements such as vents and gutter guards will not require a match. Applicants may also apply for up to $1,000 through the Defensible Space Grant Program with no match requirement. Residents will only be eligible for reimbursement if they are tackling their highest priority issues first. Let me see if I can find the answer to that question. It's a good question. Do you know the answer off the top of your head?
The first time we ran the grant program, they were actually run as two separate grant programs.
Correct.
And then we merged them. So the requirements are the same for both, the way I read this language. So that is a drawback for the home hardening. However, like we mentioned before, 80% of the people who are applying for the grants this last year met the AFN, whether it was for D-space or home hardening. And this was actually a pretty resounding request to re-engage the AFN requirements for both the home hardening and the D-space from our member agencies. We put together a ad hoc subcommittee of our subject matter experts who are managing the grant program with Maria Schmidt, and it was fairly unanimous and resounding that they wanted the AFN reinstituted.
Okay, just one follow-up. Should this end up, so there's 20% of people that it won't qualify. I know we're using the very broad definition of AFN, which covers a lot of folks, but could we revisit this in the future if we think it's, as we see, there may be an obstacle to people proceeding. So I'm not saying now, but maybe over the next 6 months, sort of see if people are not removing stuff because they're not eligible for grant funds.
Absolutely. And our grant program has been a tremendous producer of data. So we'll be able to have excellent side-by-side data comparisons. And so if we see indicators that perhaps we need to approach the board for such a decision, we can.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chief Berlant and Chief Bigelow. Lots of stars on their collars.
Did I repeat it? During the Marin Water Tour, I had a chance to talk with Assembly Member Bob Rivas, who is going to be the new Speaker of the House and Speaker of the Assembly in July. And he was very interested in the work we're doing and thinks it should be a statewide effort, he told me. So hopefully that's good contact for us also. So thank you for the tours. Going to the public now on this item, Martina.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, item 7B, the fiscal year 22-23 work plan implementation update, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands from the public.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the board for discussion. There's no action required. All right, seeing none. We're now going to move to the action calendar, and the first item is A, strategic measures for goals 1, 3, and 5. And there's a recommendation to approve the proposed strategies and strategic metrics for goals 1, 3, and 5 as presented in the revised strategic plan, pages 10, 11, 13, and 16 and 17. Mark, you're going to kick this off? And
I
bring Charlotte
am,
in?
and then I'm gonna kick it off to the brains. And I gotta say, I have not always been a fan of data. I was pulling hose and starting IVs and stuff like that for much of my career. I have Matthew Heimel in large part to thank for my appreciation of data, because Jason and I were not going to be able to grow the fire department in the way it did unless we can show it to Matthew through data. Charlotte was a big help in that. One of my biggest successes using data was to get the Marin County Fire Department to go from 2-person engine companies to 3-person engine companies. And we use data to get there. Now we're in the wildfire prevention world where we're trying to prove a negative. We don't want a fire to come and prove that we've been doing great work. So we're going to have to do it through data. So this has been well, depends on what your definition of long is, but it's been a 3+ year iterative process to create our strategic plan. Started with our mission, vision, created goals, objectives. And then we wanted to take it slow to get our measures of success, since the measures of success that we've seen around the fire world, quite frankly, are not good. How many miles, how many acres? That really doesn't show what type of risk reduction that we're creating. So I've been rattling off goals 1, 3, and 5, and some people know what they are, and some people don't. So I'm going to say goal 1 is vegetation management. Goal 3 is grants. Goal 5 is DSpace. That's what we're addressing today. We're going to go through a second iterative process for goals 2 and 4, and that's evacuation systems and detections, and then public education respectively. And we'll create a new ad hoc subcommittee to create measures of success for those. Wanted to thank the ad hoc subcommittee members for their time, their commitment, and quality of the work that they put together, because when we brought that work back to our subject matter experts, which was a combination of members from the Ops Committee and Advisory Technical Committee and MWPA staff, very few changes, just some clarifications. And so Directors McMillan, Kurtz, Hilliard, Molesworth, Paulson, and Burke, thank you very much for your time. I think we put together a really good product, and I'm going to pass it off to Charlotte.
Good afternoon, directors, members of the public. Thank you for having me. I'm a consultant for MWPA, and it's my true pleasure to present these measures to you today. This is very exciting work. I've done a lot of work in program evaluation and impact evaluation, and I think this is, if I had my way, this is how I would do it. So it's exciting to be able to show that. Oops. Okay, so the recommendation before you is to approve the proposed strategic measures for goals 1, 3, and 5. I will go through them very briefly in this presentation, but they are attached in the packet that you received for this meeting, directly in the strategic plan for the organization. Mark already went through this, but just for the record, the background is listed on this slide and will be made available with the minutes. We discussed a number of criteria for establishing these metrics and these measures. The first one was that everything be listed as much as possible in percent rather than absolute numbers. As Mark mentioned, saying we treated, 2,000 acres doesn't mean very much if there's 100,000 of them that need to be treated. So we want to keep things in relative terms. It's not always possible, but as much as possible, we'd like to do that. We feel the measures must remain at a strategic level, and that's not to say that we are disregarding other measures. It's just to say that we're creating a separation between what we'll be reporting to you and to the public in terms of progress, and what will be provided to anybody who wishes to see it, really, but in particular our member agencies at the program level. So there's a whole proposal for program measures that will be accompanying these strategic measures. And actually, that was the main feedback of the working group on this work, was that they like the strategic measures. They would like to be able to, for each of them, filter, get more details, drill down, get more details about it, which is music to my ears, because it means that they're paying attention to the data and engaging their staff and their resources accordingly. And hopefully that means you will see the measures you approve today start moving in the right direction when we track them over time. Obviously, we want things that are clear and easy to communicate to the public, not much lingo, definitions as much as possible. Sometimes it's hard to remember that, but we all have to do it. The gathering of data for tracking each of these measures must be compiled in an efficient way, lessening the burden on staff. I think the last thing we want here is a progress dashboard that is never updated because it's too hard for staff to collect data to update each of the measures that we're proposing. So everything that you see here will be automated as much as possible. For some of these measures, we actually have they'll be updated every 24 hours as the inspection and evaluation program is conducted. For others, it'll be weekly or monthly. It sort of depends on what the measure is. And then the last one, last but not least, is the importance of striking a balance between comparison between zones and the ability to provide measures at for the entire JPA, but also allowing our zones and our member agencies to work independently and to strategize as their needs direct them to, because the risk profiles and other aspects of these measures might be very different from one zone or one agency to another. So we have to respect that independence. So in the staff report, I provided a little paragraph on the methodology that we accepted for this work. I used the example of the evaluation on private parcel programs. So here I'll go through the other goal one instead. So you have both, but essentially the idea is simply to break down the steps that lead to better prevention and compile the measures along what we call the causal chain. So in the case of vegetation management, the first step is that there's an assessment of a proposed area that fire prevention experts feel need to be treated. The second step is to go through the CEQA and regulatory approval process. Then the treatment is implemented. And of course, here it's very important to measure maintenance so that the benefits continue over time. The fuel is removed. And at that point, we can say that we feel the risk is lessened. So we have a better after than we did before. Essentially, it's the concept here, right? Comparing without, then, and then with the treatment. So for goal one, this is what the measures will be. They're listed in your strategic plan. I'm not going to go over them, but I'll be happy to take questions after the presentation. For goal 3 and goal 5, we're using the same causal chain. Those two goals are related. So essentially on private parcels, at some point, there's an inspection, an evaluation takes place. After that evaluation takes place, the next thing that needs to happen for risk to be reduced is that resident must be informed of the findings that were identified on their property by our inspectors. So the resident has to somehow access their evaluation report. The next step is the resident decides to do something, and here we can incentivize behavior one way or another through our grants program. Then the resident actually takes action, either him or herself or through the help of a contractor. the fuel is removed. And again, it's only at that point that we can say this parcel is safer after treatment than it was before. So again, same thing here for the goal 5 strategic measures before you. They follow this causal chain of events here. And then for grants, we really are measuring the grants program contribution to the overall mitigation effort that's being done. So we're measuring to what extent our findings on the property being resolved with the help of grant versus other means of mitigation or resolution. I did not mention it here, but the reason also why we're bringing this to you, quote unquote, only now is because we feel it's important to have to use modeling efforts to quantify the risk that is being reduced. So everything I've discussed until now are outputs and outcome measures. We're doing this, we feel this is removed, this is resolved. But in the end, what we're really trying to get at is to show that if the fire were to come through, it would be less devastating, less dangerous, less destructive than without it. So then without our efforts and our treatment. So that's the work of Willow Labs. And they're using the evaluation program data. They've already worked with the Greater Shaded Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break on vegetation programs. They will continue to do that in the fall, but we have to the reason it's taking so much time is because we have to get to a point where we have enough data collected from all our agencies, and that data is being passed around to Willow Labs in a speedy enough manner so that they can run their models and update everything on time for us to use that for decision making. So long story short, we'll get there and we'll come back to you with actual risk scores once we have the data quality where we want it to be. So I know you're going to ask me about goal 2 and 4. So I thought I'd try to start answering this now. Goal 2, detection, alert, and evacuation. Your board has approved an initial assessment by Sonoma Technology. This tool is ready. It's by tool, I mean, it's essentially we're calling a data ball. It's a GIS collection of many different layers and models that can be used for analysis. The report is being edited at the moment. The evacuation risk is going to be divided into 3 categories: fire and fuels, roadways and infrastructure, and communication decision-making. The measures for fire and fuel risk are the same as the measures for goal 1. So, when I think about creating strategic measures for goal 2, I already know some of them are going to simply be collected through our efforts and measures under goal 1. The other thing is that mitigation in the context of evacuation can be conceptualized in different ways. It's not only things we do on the ground on a property like a vegetation project or on a private parcel. There's also policies that need to be put in place. There are different programs that need to be created. So the measures are going to depend on the type of mitigation activities that we undertake for this goal. We'll also be using modeling risk scores for this, just like we do for the other 2 goals I've proposed. And then mitigation in the context of evacuation will require significant partnerships with the Office of Emergency Management, with the transportation agencies and other agencies in Marin. So we are starting to reach out now that we have a final report to show about this effort, and trying to engage them, trying to understand their world. It's very different from the world of fire prevention, especially transportation, and bringing them to the table to show them what we've done with their help. They've been involved throughout, but get them to start discussing mitigation solutions with us. And then for goal 4, education. Under this goal, the progress really is, in my view anyways, contributing to moving the needle on the other 4 goals. So our education and outreach efforts should contribute to the progress on the measures that we have identified for the other goals. So for example, you have before you a measure to to assess residents' access to their evaluation report. Education is a part of that, educating residents to how do you access your report? This is what your report looks like. These are the information available in your report. This is how you apply for a grant. All that, if we do our education work properly, will simply show a higher level of resident accessing their report. That's the ultimate measure that education efforts will be directed to. So that's just to say that creating measures under goal 4 is different from the other goals because there's it's sort of like contributing to measures already before you today. Also, under this goal, we'll be using the risk perception survey that has been in design process through the year and will be implemented starting in July, August. So that's very exciting because again, it will provide geo-specific data about levels of preparedness, preparations and risk perception. Yeah, initial conversations are in progress for that. But I will say on education that really it's about starting to be more geo-specific about what needs to happen where and about what in terms of education. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Mark, anything you want to add?
Well, besides a big thank you for the work that Charlotte's done, and then also the subject matter expertise from our member agencies. Again, I'll say it again, strength of the MWPA is the strength of our member agencies, and we received a lot of great feedback from staff. And I did want to mention that Charlotte's already working with our web designer and having graphical displays for each of these measures of success that'll be readily accessible on our website with easy to understand visuals.
Great. So questions of Charlotte or Mark? Catherine.
Thank you again for the excellent work. So we have so many things going on, and it's all funneling into the question of, are we creating a baseline to which we can measure in all of the different things that are going on? Where is are we creating the baseline? Do we have enough experience after 2 years to have a baseline in order to make these metrics, to prove the metrics? That's question number one. Number two, and I'll stop. A lot of discussion in this very well done description of our plan talks about flame length. I have absolutely no idea. Is that if the stick is 6 feet long and it's burning, is the flame length 6 feet? I mean, can you please define flame length for me? I don't understand it. Okay, so okay. Because the pictures show that beyond the fuel that's burning, there are flames extending out. Since it's mentioned a lot, can you?
Yeah, it's basically from the base of the fire to the tip of the flame. So if the flames, if the what's burning is 6 feet vertically.
Yeah.
And the flames are going 4 feet higher than that, and the flames are all the way down at the bottom, you have 10-foot flame lengths.
Thank you. Okay. Got it.
And there is science behind the number 4 feet. We have what's called a Hall chart, and a Hall chart is a mechanism to predict flame lengths. 8 foot flame length is where we have to disengage from direct attack to indirect attack. 4 feet flame length is where we can keep fires from around the structure staying where they're at rather than moving towards the structure. So that's why we came up with that number 4.
Thank you so much.
And on the baseline, I can answer that. So it depends on the goal. We are trying to establish a baseline, but it depends on what and on the goal. So for example, for the goal number 5 for the evaluation program, some of our agencies have only been using fireside since July 1st. So we don't quite have, baseline is something that we don't create. It's something that the data, at some point we have enough data to call it a baseline. We feel like the data collection efforts have been significant enough to call it a baseline. So I think that the idea is to wait until there's a full year of data on depending on the measure to be able to say, yeah, we have a baseline, now we could start making targets.
Bruce.
Hi, Charlotte and team. This is a really fantastic product, and you know that I've been advocating this since day one, that we have metrics and monitoring. I'm looking. I have a question, point of clarification, that on page 15, the objective for goal 5, defensible space, is create and maintain appropriate defensible space on all parcels. That's what we set up in our strategic plan, defensible space on all parcels. And I look at the metrics. 5A is percent of parcels that we've evaluated. We're looking at percentages, kind of the increments that were of progress. Every year we set a certain number of parcels that we want to do work on. And so number of parcels evaluated over total number of parcels times the target zone percent. Residents' engagement is great. Issues resolved on mitigation is great. What I'm asking is addressing risk on private parcels, percent reduction in risk, and I'm assuming that that is relative to those parcels that we've evaluated, or annual target, what you have you. But what I think I see in measure 5E is the percent of parcels that have a projected flame length of 4 feet or less. That is not the incremental measure, but it is relative to the total number of parcels in the county, and is more directly responding to the objective 5.2, which is create and maintain defensible space. So I think, there's two pieces here. There's an incremental metric, but my question is, am I correct that 5E, percent of parcels that have projected flame length, is a measure of the percent of all parcels that have a projected flame length of less than 4 feet?
So these measures are based on the private parcel home evaluation program. That's Fireside. To my knowledge, that program is not being used for all parcels.
Okay, then if I just may make a statement that I think we need to aspire to look at the language under objective 5.2, which is create and maintain appropriate defensible space on all parcels. We don't have a way of accounting for that right now. That's what I think is absent in the work that's been done.
I believe we can.
You can.
Yeah,
but
I believe
it's
we
not
can.
there in print right now. So
Okay.
a suggestion is that let this roll. I'm supportive of this.
Okay.
But my suggestion is that if we're going to kind of be specific, be true to the strategic plan and the objectives that we've laid out, that we have to have a metric that measures how well we're meeting that objective. And there currently is not a metric that answers objective 5.2 all parcels.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Great. Other comments, questions? Catherine, one more.
First, a big compliment. This was really public, easy to read and very informative. My concern is about the map. I mean, we are divided into sections within the county. And my concern is that we keep the goal of being an entire group together, that we don't compete with each other or look at what is being done I think in a report that is a spotlight on a section of time, that some of the group, I think how do I do this without being politically correct? We need to do our own things that are site specific in our individual areas of the county, but at the same time, we need to keep our mind on the goal is, what are the things that are not being done outside our own specific area that we could join in and do? And that it's just a comment because we have divided by sector, southern, northern, central and all. And I think that is what's being done mostly, but it's just a wish that we keep, for example, in Southern Marin, we're working together with Western Marin because we need to, because it's a part of the escape routes are also streets that people have to get in and out of. It's not just for the fire trucks. We need to, if we have something that we can share with them and they don't have the allocation of money out of what we take in property tax, we need to do it anyway because fire doesn't know boundaries. So that the only thing that I wanted, the whole point of this is let's keep it an MWPA focus. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Other comments or questions? I'm sorry, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple of questions, like everyone, I, really appreciated reading this and thought it was really well done. I have a question about the zone targets, because there's a couple measures such as 1B and one of the fives, maybe 5A, that talk about the zone target percentage and then describes that each zone will set its own target regarding whatever whatever it's referring to. When we talk about zones setting their own targets, is that who is setting those targets? Is it MWPA setting targets for those zones? Is it local fire agencies setting those zones? Is it councils setting those zones? Zone targets, sorry. I know the zones are set, the zone targets. Who's setting the zone targets?
We will be working with the member agencies to set those zone targets because they're the people that know what that target should be the best. And the reason why we did go to the zone level, we'll be able to aggregate, but the reason why we did go to the zone level, and I'll use Inverness and San Rafael as two very disparate examples. Every structure in Inverness is within the WUI, whereas not every structure is in a high risk zone in San Rafael. So those metrics might want to be a little bit different. We want to make sure that it's tailored to the area that we're working in.
Okay, thanks. So it's MWPA will be playing a very active role in determining that.
Yep.
Great. And then as far as because the emphasis is relative here, and I know that we're setting the methodology right now. Do we have a sense for what the kind of goals, like what the percentages for each thing, for each measure are going to be, or are we kind of waiting to see where the data comes in and then it's just going to be as long as it increases each year, or as long as it increases to a hypothetical maximum and then stays set?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So it depends on which measure, as always. I think that the working group that included all zones and both the ATC and the Ops Committee strongly suggested or recommended that we wait and have a benchmark. So we have 1 full year of data that we're collecting, that everybody's looking at together before we engage into conversations about setting targets, which of course need to include, discussions about resources and what needs to be done if an organization sets a target at 80%, whichever the measure is, we need to make sure that the resources are there to reach that target. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. What was I going to say? Sorry, lost my train of thought. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense. So we're really looking internally for that, for each kind of, for the baseline, I guess.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, for the risk scores, both for goal 1 and for goal 5, we have conducted what's called a sensitivity analysis, where we essentially are looking at for those measures that rely on a modeling score. We're looking at how sensitive the models are. If we conduct mitigation strategically by targeting the highest risk, say junipers, like there's the top quartile of all most dangerous junipers across the county, how does our risk score vary versus just randomly mitigating juniper? And so we want to see how sensitive the model is to that. So that was conclusive. That's why we feel confident in recommending that we rely on these models. We also have to all be keep in mind that for some of these measures, eventually what we're going to trend to is a plateau, and that's a good thing. We're not going to be looking at continuous, increase and increase and increase. There is a sort of a natural level that things will get at. I don't think we're ever going to reach 100% of everything on all the measures. That's not what we're trying to get at here.
And if I may add, some of the modeling we're doing and hasn't been done. And some people, one of them, for instance, is Ember creation and Ember broadcast. And there's some people that are saying we shouldn't be using, some people in the industry saying that we shouldn't use Ember production and broadcasts because that science hasn't been completely verified yet. But we're following what our presenter said yesterday. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. And so we are dipping our toe into that. And we're going to see how it works, and then we're going to adjust as we need.
If I can just add on that one, we're doing it in a careful way. So we're isolating the elements of the model that have the most, the largest margin of error, if you will, are being isolated from the others so that it's easy to disaggregate those scores and to, as science evolves, thermodynamic, Ambercast, and so on, it's easy to adjust that one model that relies on that and integrate it back with the others. I'm sorry, this is very technical, but that's what the models are.
Okay, thanks. I was just thinking about acres of road maintained, but yes, that's great. Appreciate all the detail. And then the last question has to do a little bit, again, with kind of relative versus absolute, and this is the last question, but is there any sense, for example, 1A is acres or road miles approved over acres or road miles proposed? So, I mean, MWPA is the one proposing as well as the one, and then they're being approved externally. But is there a certain, I guess, minimum of road miles that we might want to propose per year to be thinking of the program as successful? Because if we just proposed, 1 mile and it's approved, then we'd have 100%, but that doesn't really tell us much.
Right, I'll take that question. It's a great question. The reason why we included metrics associated with acres proposed and approved is because MWPA is only one of the approval processes for many projects, particularly those in the coastal zone. And so we may have 100 miles of roadside evacuation route project approved by the MWPA board. However, if you need to go through coastal act compliance, et cetera, that measuring implementation of MWPA approved miles only tells one piece of the story.
And I think you were asking about the intention to propose a number of miles. That's determined by our member agencies based on their expertise.
Okay, got it. Right, and then I guess and that's a really interesting point because there's a chance that this percentage could be quite low, but it doesn't mean that MWPA isn't doing a good job. What it could mean that MWPA is actually pushing really aggressively in areas where the approvals are really slow or not feasible. So just, some, I guess, concern there that there's always more to the story. Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Rachel, were you ready for a question?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Bruce, actually, I'd like to direct that question. I wanted a little bit more clarification on the all parcels. Are you differentiating all parcels versus private parcels versus evaluated parcels? I wasn't clear when you were referencing for objective 5.2 where it says all parcels.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the nuance. It just says all parcels.
Right.
And so the expectation is that all parcels will get the appropriate level of, as the word on page 15 says, defensible space, I think on page 15. Create and maintain appropriate defensible space on all parcels, period. I'm just thinking that, programmatically, that, that's our intention. That's our promise, is to achieve defensible space for all parcels, all citizens, I guess, if you will. And that there just needs to be a metric that reflects how well we're doing on a total basis, not an expected annual incremental basis. That was my point.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think as we go forward, maybe there's an opportunity as this gets updated along the way, that we clarify the all parcels versus, because we reference private parcels, are all parcels,
Yeah.
as well as then evaluated parcels. Right.
I think the confusion might be just that all world, because the goal 5 really is about private parcels. Goal number 5 is about people's homes on their private parcels and residents. So that's the universe of parcels that's being considered. There are residential parcels. So I think I was part of the working group that established the objective, and I think there was a lot of word tweaking and wordsmithing during that process. And I think I can't recall exactly, but I think all in this context means all private parcels, essentially. And in that case, we are capturing with these measures all of it. So that's, yeah.
But if you will, I think that definitely needs clarification because a lot of parcels that are private parcels haven't been inspected. So if they haven't been inspected, then they're not going to be included in this aggregate.
That's
Correct?
my point.
They would be under measure one, right? Measure one shows all parcels inspected versus all parcels that.
I think a resolution could be all inspectable parcels.
Yes.
Which
As I said, I think it's a wordsmithing. piece.
Yeah.
I
all,
think it
all
is.
inspectable, and Charlotte gave me homework to go through the different classifications in the assessor recorder's office. Thank you, Charlotte, to help give a guidance, what's an inspectable parcel and what is not.
I just
Okay.
think as we go along in history, people, other people will look at this. The other question I have is, so with our goals, we have our 5 goals. And I apologize if we've actually discussed this. Have we ranked within the goals? Are they all at 20%? Does each goal carry the same value?
We have not assigned values and we've been allowing, we've described what percentage of our efforts are going towards each goal. And I believe as we work through these metrics across the goals and we see the risk reductions, then we can start assigning target values,
Because there's target values within each of the measures,
right?
but then targets at each of the the upper level.
Right. And then to aggregate in that way, we will have to start weighting things. And so we're going to have to take that slow.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Yeah. Bruce, we want to move this along too, so, okay.
Yeah, I understand one moving on, but I do want to make the point that I do think a little bit more work should be done at some point to address the all parcel, not the percent target, the zone target. And I think that I'm hearing that from other board members, but I'm supportive of this, but I think this is a great start, but I think we have more work to do to fully build this out. So that's just I want to make a clear public comment in that regard.
Sure. And I think staff has heard that and they'll address those issues. That's okay. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, Julie, go ahead.
I think we have a lot of various consultants helping us with all of this work. And I think it might be really helpful to have maybe at the very end, an executive summary indicating all the consultants that are helping and what their role is and how it affects each goal. Maybe just a chart, something, so that when we're talking to the public, it's easier for us to keep everybody straight, like what's Willow Labs doing versus what is Berkeley doing on the evacuation versus. So just a little cheat sheet would be helpful. Thank you.
Last chance for the board. We're going to go to the public now.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 to unmute yourself. And that would be item 8A, strategic measures for goal 1, 3, and 5. Sir, I see no hands for comment.
Thank you. We're going to bring back to the board for further discussion and or a motion. We're looking to approve the strategic metrics for goals 1, 3, and 5.
I'll move that. Barbara Kohler.
Thank you, Barbara. And second, Kirsch. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. We approve the goals 1, 3, and 5 strategic metrics. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain.
Can I just ask a point of order question? Since this is a hybrid meeting, do we need to do a roll call vote? No.
I don't believe so. Since all the board members are here present in the room, we don't need to do it.
Excellent. Thank you.
I will acknowledge that we had a unanimous vote to make it clear. Thank you. Thanks, Barbara. Next item is B, statewide reinsurance pool for wildfire resilient communities. Mark?
Yes, so a very active conversation going on now about this. I think all of you have probably had some of your constituents reach out and express concern with State Farm, Allstate, saying they will no longer write new policies. And probably everyone thinking that is one step towards they're going to stop renewing policies. I know I have that concern. And then if we get to there, then what does that mean? And what are the trickle down effects? Mark Northcross from NHA's advisors reached out to us, because of the work that we were doing, being the leaders in the state around wildfire resilience. And, insurance companies are pulling out. We know that. And a lot of the insurance companies are pulling out because reinsurance companies no longer want to invest in California. And so that's kind of painted us into a corner. And there's multiple reasons why State Farm and Allstate are pulling out, but a little bit of it is probably related to that. This effort that we're going to talk about today started in Paradise because, Paradise has the opportunity to start from a clean slate. But we need some geographical diversity in this. Some of the key players, some of you may be familiar with them, but there are top names in this line of work, and that is CoreLogic, Milliman, and Munich Re. Those are the big players in this, and the fact that they're part of this endeavor, I think, speaks well to the quality of the work that's coming. Staff feels that this is low risk, high potential gain. And then I did reach out to some of our people that know much more about insurance than I do and asked them to watch the presentation and discussion at the executive committee. And all of the consensus so far has been, yes, this is a good idea for us to embark upon. It may not end up looking exactly like what we're going to talk about today, but it may stimulate conversations that comes to a solution. And I feel like we can be part of the solution or get out of the way. But I think something that'll resonate with the board is that Jean Bonander, I asked her to take a look at this, and she had resounding support and has offered to help us with this, work with Mark, and with her experience with helping to set up the Bay Cities Joint Powers Insurance. I think that's an excellent resource. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mark. I'm going to do a screen share, and he's going to do the good old fashioned next slide.
Great. Welcome, Mark.
Your assistant there, I pressed the right button to have microphone. Okay, great. Mark Northcross, NHA Advisors. We're what you call municipal advisors. That means we structure and manage debt financing and raise funds for public infrastructure. In my old age, I've had a lot of mission creep, and I'm now working on climate change adaptations, keeping me going. And we are the municipal advisor of the town of Paradise. And we've learned a whole lot. And thank you, one, as a Mill Valley resident, for what you're doing. And two, thank you for having me here to make a pitch about what Mark just explained, which is forming a statewide pool for proactive wildfire risk mitigation communities. Next slide, please, Mark. So we got a grant to do some very valuable work. And it has to do with what I think is what we've heard this room and others. And the paradox is doing great things to reduce wildfire risk does not, repeat, not mean that the homeowners or the property owners will get insurance. Does not mean that. And so we want to take a look at that, do a really deep dive using a team that would focus on Paradise and come up with what it would take to actually have reliable and affordable insurance for the rebuilding of Paradise. So using Paradise as a test case, do the quant, do the math. And CoreLogic is a candidate for the leading what we call catastrophe modeler in the United States. Milliman's a candidate for the leading actuary on the planet. Munich Re dukes it out with Swiss Re every year to be the largest reinsurer on the planet. The rest of us on the list, I'll explain later. I want to talk just briefly about the importance of reinsurance. One of the reasons that primary carriers like State Farm and Allstate, as Mark alluded to, are leaving the state is that they can't get what they call stop loss coverage in a way that works for them. What stop loss coverage is, to use pulling numbers out of the air. Let's say I'm an insurer in Marin County and I've got 5,000 customers. And so for kitchen fires, all that, I take all that risk. If there's, God forbid, a massive wildfire and I lose 1,000 homes in Marin County, I could be bankrupt by losing that many homes in one location at one time. So what I want to do is reinsure that risk, get stop loss coverage that says, hey, Munich Re says, the first 300 homes are on you. Anything over that's on me. And I'm going to charge you a premium for that. That's what reinsurance and stop loss coverage is about. That's the math that right now in California is not working. Next slide, please. So we did the math. We did it assuming three key things in Paradise. And while Paradise has got different vegetation than Marin, it may change the math somewhat. It's not going to change it from the conclusions of public policy. Hopefully Mark is nodding his head. Yeah. So number one was full compliance by all new construction in Paradise, what we call IBHS standards. That's the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. It's the equivalent of the Underwriters Labs, UL approved for wildfire and fire insurance. And they've come out with some really hardcore standards for new construction in the WUI. We assumed that all new development would meet wildfire informed development patterns. That means zoning, all the planning side is right as well, which is also doable in Paradise. We also assume full implementation of wildfire buffer zones. That means annual maintenance, as prescribed by a report that was done earlier in Paradise. That's what you're doing with Ross Valley, Novato. You guys are ahead of the game on that. Thank you again for getting that work done. But it's got to be maintained basically on a regular basis. What were the results? If we assume for purposes of our math, full implementation, didn't want to go down the path of assuming partial implementation, more realistic, but let's start with the best case. 75% reduction in average annual losses from wildfire for insurers. That number was done by the insurance industry's own consultants. Milliman and CoreLogic worked primarily with the insurance industry. That is a very powerful number. It says there's light at the end of the tunnel. And again, it says for what this group is doing, there really is a benefit. It really does produce safety. Overall, since insurers have other risks besides wildfire, 75% reduction in wildfire loss is a 55% reduction in insurance premiums. Again, the insurance industry's own consultants were telling them you can reduce your premiums by half if you do these mitigation measures. But, and there's a really big but, which is why I'm here. No matter how good Paradise is, and we have a realistic chance of implementing near full 100%, all of these measures, it's not good enough because our people at Munich Re were telling us, well, Paradise is too small. We have to have geographic diversity. You got to spread the risk around geographically. And at minimum, we need all of California that's being proactive like Paradise to be in a pool. Ideally, it would be the whole west side of North America. Everything from British Columbia to New Mexico would be in the pool. If when you think like Munich Re thinks, but they'll settle for California. So we need a geographically diverse risk pool of communities that are proactive, like here, taking the lead. Next slide, please. I won't take you all the way through this. This is a breakdown of what the loss reduction was by the type of wildfire risk mitigation. It adds up to more than 100% because there's overlap and it's a mathematical thing. And even though I'm supposed to know math for finance, I can't explain that math. So don't ask me. If you need an answer to that question, I'll get back to you with somebody who can answer it. But basically the way to think about it is half of the benefit, half of that reduction in premium comes from home hardening. And this is hardcore home hardening. IBHS is more than what most people think of. A third of it comes from the buffer zones. What this organization is doing right now produces 1/3 of the 50% reduction in premiums. So thank you again. Stay the course. You are doing things that really should reduce people's insurance premiums. Next slide, please. So why geographic diversity? Well, one wildfire, if you're just in a concentrated area, as we learned from Paradise and other communities, can produce an incredible amount of damage, cause a primary carrier to lose a huge number of homes and go bankrupt. So you want to spread the risk around as much as possible. The town of Paradise is looking to apply for a grant from at least 2 sources now to do a combination of the math and what I'll call the community engagement facilitation on what a risk-sharing pool for wildfire risk would look like. And Mike, the official term for this is capacity building. I used to call it herding cats. Earlier in my career, I've now learned to call it capacity building. Next slide, please, Mark. Key questions. Okay, we know the math. The math means we're going to show Munich Re, if you get this level of geographic diversity in California amongst proactive communities, this is what you can charge as a premium for stop loss coverage. That's the number that State Farm and Allstate can't get right now. They can't even get a number of what it'll cost them to even build a premium for the homeowner around it. These are the questions that go beyond the math that we got to address. Will communities with strong risk mitigation end up subsidizing and paying for losses in communities with weak risk mitigation? You got to answer that question. Will the cost be risk adjusted for each community? Will the pill itself negotiate with, for example, with Munich Re and buy stop loss coverage from all primary carriers operating within their jurisdictions? How will the benefits of the catastrophic reinsurance policy be distributed to carriers and property owners in each community? The list of questions can go on. But that's just to give you a flavor. These are the kinds of things that have to be dealt with amongst your peers, including your staff and the electeds around the state. Next slide, please. So we're going to get a grant. We have the Governor's Office of Planning and Research Regional Resilience Grant Program. Our initial work was funded by the Bay Area Council's California Resilience Challenge Program. We're going to that as well. And ideally, we'll be going for other grants as well to fully fund this. Next slide, please. I should say the grant deadlines for 2 of the ones we're going for are in September of this year. What's our ask? Last slide. We need you, we want you to be a co-applicant. Okay, what that means is that while the town of Paradise is the lead applicant, will be managing the grant, it really helps us a lot to get grant to have co-applicants or other proactive communities in the state that are willing to consider being in a pool, not to enhance safety, but to deliver insurance for your constituents. So that is the core ask. And I will leave it at that. Mark's turned off the slides there, which is the hand to say to wrap up my presentation. Thank you. And I'll ask for questions.
Great. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'll address some questions I know that are going to come. No match for us, minus some staff time. However, we can build staff time in, and especially if we have Jean climb on board and NHA and Paradise is agreeable to that, we can build in her staff time. How much, we don't know yet. We're still working on that figure. And Julie asked this question during the executive committee, and Megan researched it. It is included in the staff report, but just to highlight that we do feel with the way this is structured, it is in alignment with MWPA's guiding language.
All right, questions of Mark or Mark? Yeah, Stephen.
Thank you very much for this. Could you go back to slide 5 real quick? Has to do with the IBHS standards. So regrettably, Paradise is a rebuild. So presumably they have to be in lockstep with IBHS in order to
Everything
qualify, et
coming out of the
cetera,
ground in
right?
Paradise is full compliance with IBHS.
In the case of some place like Marin, where we're pretty much built out, what impact would this have on our planning and zoning and other regulations, say at a municipal level or a county level? And how would we qualify?
That's a great question. I'll keep a brief answer. What you can achieve is the reduction from the wildfire buffer zones. You're doing that. Okay,
Understood.
so that's divide 55% by 3. It's maybe 18% reduction in insurance premiums. To get to, you have to do a lot of remodeling, okay? A lot of remodeling. We have in Paradise, because, I hate to say this, but the name has marquee value. We have a FEMA grant to fund up to $75,000 per home to do IBHS remodeling, okay? And then you say $75,000 a home, that's a big number. That's a Paradise number. It's going to cost more in Marin, to get a contractor to come in and do the same work that you're doing in Paradise. So it's expensive. And we have a grant. As a second most affluent county in California, I think you're number 2. Your chances of getting a grant to help homeowners do this, I don't know. The only good news I can give you, sir, is that CoreLogic did the math on less than 100% compliance with the IBHS standards. The magic number to get to the level that delivers the benefit we saw up there is 70%. Okay. And that's still in Paradise, we're going to get there within 2 years. Well, good for us. In Marin, I don't know what it's going to take to get to 70%. And that's a great question. And to get to that level, it's going to be a pretty heavy lift financially, politically, and all the above.
Next question. Who else do you see joining together with Paradise? Let's assume MWPA does participate and I support that. How about our neighbors in Sonoma or other, high fire impact areas? Where are they in this?
I am in the process of contacting them. Tahoe Basin is looking good right now for obvious reasons. Beyond that, I'm still reaching out. I need geographic diversity. If anybody in this room has friends in Southern California who might be interested in this and dialogue, please contact me. I need to spread it around. I've reached out to the mother lode counties. They're obviously very, very vulnerable. So it's a matter of, we've got basically 2 months to go pull together a team, if you will, of co-applicants. And I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. But I need some help. So if you have any contacts, please find me.
So I wish you the best in that process. And I think this is a very merited use of MWPA time to at least understand the issues so that we can explain them to our constituents if and when the hammer comes down. And we will have done our best to understand that and see how we can mitigate it. So I think it's very useful.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Catherine? No. Alexis, yeah.
Aside from the thing, from just the question about whether or not it's sort of within scope and the analysis that would suggest that it is, what's the downside?
Stretching staff time.
Okay.
And so we would build into the agreement.
So it's just, it's that the allocation of that resource really is what we're considering.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments? All right, you're going to go to the public then for public comment on this item?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, and that would be item 8B, the statewide reinsurance pool for wildfire resilient communities. Please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands for comment.
Bring it back to the board here for further comments and or direction. So we're looking for a vote to authorize the executive officer to be co-applicant on the OPR grant application to engage in discussion with stakeholders. That's the motion I'm looking for.
I can go ahead and make the motion.
Hey, thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Fred. And it's moved by Casissa and second by Hillard. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Thank you all. Thank you, Mark. Very good. So we're going to move on to item 9, which are committee reports now. We're running a little late today, so I'll ask you to be brief. Rich, Fire Safe Marin.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will be brief. Let me share a screen real quick here. You all have a copy of the report. It's pretty much self-explanatory, but I'll just give a couple highlights real quickly. May was a real busy month, to say the least, with Ember Stomp. You heard a bit about that already. We more than doubled last year's attendance. We were really happy with it, and it truly was an opportunity for everybody who's engaged in this to get together. It was pretty cool. If you notice, our social media strategy and messaging has featured the work of the MWPA. There were some great full-page ads in the IJ. Hope you take a look at that, but we're putting that all over our media. And we have some new partners, KCBS and KWMR. Actually, those radio stations really enjoyed working with us, broaden the outreach to a different way. Social media was really busy. And again, this is what we call organic media. This is what we create. You know, in 1 month, 160 posts viewed 67,000 times. But the important thing is engagement. Engagement levels are explained here. They're really, really high. And that means people like it and are interacting and they're sharing it and so forth. So you can see some pictures of it. You know, we talk about it. We don't always put the pictures in. So you might want to go through that. Website was busy, get an idea how many people are looking at all the different things we're doing. A lot of work coming up on the website. I keep saying that, but it's behind the scenes, we're doing quite a bit. Everything that we do that's effective in some level doesn't involve working with partner agencies. So this is just an example of the different agencies we worked with last month, how we engage with them, different things we did with them. Exhaustive list here. And then the ADAPT campaign is really built on paid advertising. Once again, when you look at this, you'll see that imagery is really focused 100% on the MWPA. We're really proud of that and really makes sense at the time of year that we're in, because it's a chance to capture all this great work that's been going on during the year. I mean, this is the type of stuff that reaches 1 million eyeballs in Marin County. So it really is out there quite a bit. We continue, everything we do pretty much is bilingual now. Lots of videos always being created, a lot of new educational materials, in some ways related to some of the work we did with Ember Stomp. And then we're about to go into the spring workshops. We're setting the dates for that, and that'll end up with highlight reels focusing on the 5 zones and one highlight reel created for MWPA to showcase all the work and put it on the website. And then these are all the highlights from Ember Stomp. Again, you can kind of dig through it. For those of you there, a few nice pictures of what we did. And that's the report. Glad to take any questions.
Thanks, Rich. Hang on there. We're going to do the 2 other reports and then do questions and public comment. Expedite this a little bit. So item B is Advisory Technical Committee.
And the Advisory Technical Committee and the Operations Committee both did not meet after the approval of the work plan, so I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Ann. So now we could go to questions to Fire Safe Marin on anything they presented today. Stephen.
Thank you, Rich. And your report prompted me to go back to the website today, which is just a wonderful resource. And my question is, do you plan to run any campaign or awareness, for example, around the Chipper program or July 1 with the basically relaunch or refresh of the grants program? Feels like it would be an opportunity for promotion either on the web, the homepage or through social media. So I'm just curious if you have any plans to do a campaign around either of those.
Yeah, definitely around the grants. We just sort of got the latest update from Maria. In fact, we changed some of the language on the website. And so we'll be doing something around that. The Chipper program does some of its own publicity, but of course we'll promote that. We should get something on the main page. It's in the newsletters that go out to everybody. We remind at our monthly meetings, the FireWise leaders of what we're doing, but we'll social media and so forth when we get out there. So.
Great, thank you.
Catherine, did you have a question? Compliment
I just
over
wanted to compliment you on the full page ads in the IJ. I see them all the time. My neighbors comment on it and it keeps me reminded of where I'm supposed to go and be. Thank you. That's really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. I really do appreciate that comment because I'm kind of fond of that myself. Probably it's my age and, I still like hard copy newspaper. And when you flip through and you go, oh, wow, look at this. It's great. So I do appreciate that. It's nice to know that people are looking at it and liking it.
Yep, and even the online versions are quite impressive, Rich. So, Rachel.
Thanks, Rich. Ember Stomp was great. I was actually curious about your comment in the report about the potential of looking at changing it to the fall.
So our team talked quite a bit about this, and then I met with Mark to talk to him about, and Jason Weber to get kind of a little bit broader perspective. We're thrilled because we more than doubled the attendance this year. I think it could be bigger. We came out of a wet winter. It is a little bit early still for people. There hasn't been, although other than New York, which was pretty dramatic, much wildfire in the news. I think if we waited till September, which is what we're considering, I think that the attendance will be even greater. Not that we want wildfires, but the likelihood of there having been some, whether they're in Marin or somewhere else in California, is pretty high. And it's kind of obvious to everybody, when there has been some smoke in the air and some publicity around wildfires, our website explodes. People's interests go way up. And I think it will continue to draw in those who don't engage quite as much, so that just brings them out more. So we think bring in even a broader audience. So it's not cast in stone, but that's the direction we're thinking of going.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Other comments or questions? We're going to go to the public on the item 9 now.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the committee reports, specifically the Fire Safe Marin report, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 to raise your hand if you're joining us by phone, and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands for comment.
Thank you. So seeing no more comments, we're going back to the board for final discussion and or moving on with no actions required. All right, we're going to move on then to informational items. 10A is very important. Letters of interest for vice president and president of the board coming up. Transition period and voting is in August, I believe. So we'll receive presentations from those two members that have submitted letters of interest. I'm going to go to Julie first to give her few minutes.
Thank you, Dennis. I think all of you saw my letter in the packet, so I don't want to go on and on. I want to be brief. But I think we're all here because we all realize that wildfire is the biggest issue in Marin. And I think it's imperative that we continue to work to get our communities prepared and fire adapted. It's been my pleasure to serve as the board vice president and work closely with President Rodoni. And I've enjoyed working with Mark and Anne and Martina and Jean and Megan and Charlotte and many others. And I want to ensure that the board continues to trust and support the MWPA's first-rate staff and consultants. I'm extremely proud of everything that's been accomplished in only 3 short years, with lots of it on Zoom. And since Measure C passed, and I want to help MWPA continue its rapid upward trajectory. There's no roadmap or precedent for what we've accomplished or where we will go. I'm particularly proud that we are a steward of the environment and that not 1 cent has been spent on any litigation for environmental issues. I think Panorama and the ESP have been innovative and fabulous partners, and Anne has shepherded all of those issues brilliantly. I think we're using the best available science in prioritizing projects, which will be very defensible when we go out to our electorate to get the measure renewed, which will be sooner than we realize. We have excellent transparency in our decision-making and in our workings on the board. So I won't go on. If anyone has any questions about my qualifications or experience or my level of commitment, You know how to reach me. And I'm happy to talk with you in person or over the phone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And now we're going to give Rachel a chance to refer to
Thank
her,
you.
her interest in vice president.
Yeah, you also received my letter, so again, I'll keep my comments brief. I don't take lightly that every year we're given the trust and responsibility to spend about $20 million of our tax dollars to reduce the risk of wildfire. It's a big responsibility. We have an amazing management team and staff, and projects are underway, and we're establishing metrics to make us accountable to the community and the program. We're now in a great position to move forward, and I hope to serve as the vice president of the board. As I mentioned in my letter of interest, I see us entering basically like the teenage years of MWPA, not quite dog years, but this is a time that our identity is going to be really formed and we're going to be tested. As an organization, we'll need to stay focused on our goals, continue to build the community's trust, and keep the trust of our partnering agencies. As we've learned over the last couple of years, the wildfire risk we are facing was created over years and years of not really doing the work that needed to be done. And it will take time and continued attention to reduce our risk. I appreciate working with the whole board, our agencies, and the community, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work with all of you. I thank Bruce and Dennis on their path of leadership as presidents, and I look forward to the honor of working with Julie going forward.
Thank you, Rachel. There you have it. Two presentations from
There you
some
have it.
very, 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 very qualified people. So I've had the pleasure of working with both of them on the executive committee. So thank you for putting yourself out there and be willing to serve. Go ahead, Catherine.
I just want to say that I can't think of two other public servants that really deserves this opportunity. I've learned so much from the two of you, and your commitment is just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to move then on to 10B, acknowledgement of the executive committee meeting minutes, and 10C was the acknowledgement of the Citizen Oversight Committee meeting minutes of May 24th. No actions required on any of these items. If there's a question on this, I'm going to move right into 11, which is board members' request for future agenda items. Catherine? No, actually, the vote takes place at our next meeting by our bylaws and JPA rules. That happens at the first meeting of the new year. So thank you, though.
Dennis, I'm going to repeat myself, the third consecutive month that I would just ask that Mark keep track on the status of the release of the regional priority plan and bring Danny Franco in here to give us a presentation on this incredible strategic document that is MWPA is a big part of it, but I just please, Mark, keep us posted.
Will do. And if I remind, we're holding true to our promise of saying no board meeting in July, which means no executive committee as well in July. So we will be reconvening in August.
Yep, our next meeting is on August 17th. So I'll gladly call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.